This is level 2, lesson 2. In lesson 1, I talked about an alternative set of changes for bars 5 to bars 8 in the A section of both Honeysuckle Rose and Scrapple from the Apple. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the middle 8. In Honeysuckle Rose, we have a couple of dominant sevenths moving in fifths, and then it moves down a minor third, and then down a fifth. So just to recap, that's F7 for 2 bars. If you're a trumpet or a saxophone, just check the PDF so you can keep up with us in your particular key. But if you're a trumpet, that would be G, or a tenor sax, that would be G7, and if you're an alto, that would be D7. So we've got 2 bars of that. We can think of it as our home key made into a dominant seventh, but we're not actually going anywhere. It's just there for the sound. And then we go down a fifth to the 4th chord, make that a dominant seventh, that's B flat 7. Then it leaps down a minor third, which, as I said, is chord 2 with a major third, and then chord 5, and that's our dominant of our home key. So what I'm going to do in Honeysuckle Rose and also in Scrapple is insert another chord. So what chord can you insert when you get a string of dominant sevenths? Well, if you think of the first chord, which is our home key F7, if you imagine it's actually a dominant seventh belonging to B flat, we're not going to go to B flat just yet. And in fact, when we do go to B flat, that's also a dominant seventh. So we don't feel that resolution that you would feel to just a normal chord 1, because it's got the flat 7. If you think of that as a dominant seventh of B flat, then chord 2 would be C minor. That's 2, 5, 1 in B flat. So we're going to take C minor, chord 2, and F7. And then when we go to B flat 7, instead of just playing B flat 7, or the 4th chord, we're going to precede that with a minor chord. So if you imagine B flat 7 is the dominant chord, chord 5, chord 2 will be F minor, and B flat will be the 5th. Then we leap to the chord of G7, which is kind of like chord 2 but major, or you can just think of it as a leap down a minor third from B flat to G. So if we've got G as the dominant, chord 2 will be D minor, and G will be the 5th. And then our final 2 bars were C7. So if that's chord 5, chord 2 would be G minor. So it's literally 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5. And that's C minor, F7, F minor 7, B flat 7, D minor 7, G7, G minor 7, C7. In Scrapple from the Apple, you can apply exactly the same thing. So if you start with the first chord, which is concert A7, if you think of that as chord 5 of D major, although we never go quite, we do go to D, but we make it a 7. So as I explained, it doesn't really resolve properly. If you think of that as chord 5, chord 2 will be E minor. So it'll be 2, 5. Then we go to the chord of D7, so we're going to precede that with a chord 2. So that would be A minor 7, D7. Then we're going to go to the key well, we're not going to go to the key of, we're going to play G7. So that's chord 5, chord 2 will be D minor, G7 will be chord 5. Then we're going to go to C7, but we're going to precede it with its chord 2, so that would be G minor, C7. One of the things when in Scrapple, the way that the sequence moves down in fifths is that it's much more straightforward, because you're basically going from the chord 2 to chord 5, and that chord 5, if you just make it minor, it's now chord 2 of the next key. So we're on D7, make that minor, to G7, make G7 G minor, and C7. So that's kind of the theory behind it. It makes perfect sense, again, when you hear it. A lot of music does, and now you know why. If I was to improvise over those middle 8s, what could I do? I could just still think of it as just those dominant sevenths. in terms of my scales. So remember we talked about maybe pentatonics or maybe Mixolydian scales, and I would say that's a really good place to start. Also, you could bear in mind the chord tones. So, for example, in Honeysuckle Rose, C minor, you play strong notes like C, E flat, G and B flat, and F7, F, A, C, E flat, etc. So I'm just going to play Honeysuckle Rose just using the idea of the Mixolydian scales for each of the various keys. And but I'm going to put in chord 2. So there will be a bit more harmony in my left hand. Obviously, if you're a trumpet or a sax or a single line instrument, you can't actually provide your own harmony. But you could ask your pianist or guitarist accompanying you to put in those changes, and that would make it a bit more interesting. So here's an improvisation on the middle 8 using Mixolydian scales. If I do the same thing on Scrapple, precede every dominant chord with a chord 2, but this time I'm going to focus on the chord tone. So this will sound more like an exercise, but it's something that I would do unconsciously in my improvisation, but I probably would disguise it with passing notes and stuff, rather than just think chord tones, chord tones, chord tones. So here's a Scrapple with chords 2 and chord 5. Okay. I was just improvising. I could have done a very boring kind of like stuff like that. And that's up to you when you're devising your own exercises. Maybe you just want to do a pattern, maybe go up and come down. So going up, coming down, going up, coming down. Or you could come down, going up. It's going to be quite tricky to make it sound really musical, but believe me, if you do that enough times, you will really, really see the difference. And I say this from experience, having taught many classes in person with groups of people, and it really, really helps you get through changes. It's very easy to apply to all tunes, and if you've got a tune that's particularly tricky because it goes to a different key and modulates, it's a really, really good way to really understand the harmony if you're not playing the piano, because as soon as you play a chordal instrument, of course, it's slightly easier because you're thinking harmony. But if you play a single line instrument, maybe the flute, you might find that you're not quite as secure in the harmony as you thought. But after doing chord tones on a tune, you'll find it's much, much easier to play. And that's the end of the second lesson, level 2, for Honeysuckle Rose and Scrapple from the Apple. Join me for level 3.